Hi, how are you?
Hello, Mrs. Bijal. I'm doing pretty well. What about you? How's universe treating you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you so much for reaching out and yeah, for this conversation. Really excited to to
You know,
share
I
more.
would like to thank you for accepting my request on such a short notice. I thought that you're gonna give me the cold shoulder.
Oh, no, I think it's always so nice to support, people who are doing something valuable for society and the community and yeah, it's wonderful what you're doing, especially with
Thank you. I
things.
appreciate that. And
So
I'm really excited because I saw everything about you, like your Google on Google. Also, you're a bibliotherapist, I guess. So I
yeah.
would like to know what is bibliotherapy and how a person can become a bibliotherapist.
Yeah, sure. So bibliotherapy is the use of literature as a therapeutic tool. We use it to enhance mental well-being and address some of the more difficult issues that you might, go to therapy for. It's very much an adjunct tool to traditional therapy, but we use literature as a tool for guidance, for prompting thoughts, for prompting journaling and reflections. And we use those thoughts and reflections in a, counseling or therapy session to work at a deeper subconscious level and essentially just navigate therapy and process difficult emotions, find relief from painful events, traumatic events, and also just feel more validated and affirmed and heard and seen. That's one of the key things about bibliotherapy, really. It's that representation that often is hard to share in a traditional therapy session, where you're not always able to access someone else's story or borrow their story to to be able to articulate what's going on yourself. And it's that's the power in books and literature. And often, I always say to my clients, you have to leverage the power of what you're reading to enhance your own mental well-being. It's great to read for escapism, and it's great to also just be a passive reader, but sometimes being an active reader and leveraging your what you've read can really you can get so much out of it, and
Wow.
really feel better at the end of it and feel relieved, feel resolved, all those things. So
Okay. But
that's
if I tell you honestly, if I call a spade, prior to meeting you, like this thing, bibliotherapy was completely a recondite subject for me. So I was completely naive about it, and like when I met you, I tried to do some research. So what I come like in conclusion, I feel like it has to do with reading, right? When you read, it's kind of like a mental exercise that you do, and that's going to help you in elevating your like cognitive skills, creative thinking, and that's going to help you like overall for the mental well-being, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, absolutely. Look, it gives you the language to express how you're feeling. It gives you a story to use as an example for what you might be going through, right? So it allows you to feel empathized with just by reading about somebody else who's feeling angry or sad because of something similar that happened to them in the story, that character's story in fiction.
Hmm.
And you feel like you're really connecting with that character because you've been through something similar. You might have tears coming, surfacing because you're really able to connect with what the character's going through, and you might be feeling sad for them, but you might also be feeling sad for yourself because you're empathizing both not only with the character but the level of self-empathy as well. So
Okay.
it's very powerful in connecting us with our emotions, which sometimes in traditional therapy or even with a friend or family member, we're too scared to express, or we don't feel comfortable expressing, or we're worried about being judged, the risk of judgment. So, having this story that allows you to give a voice to how you're feeling in a safe space and not feel judged, and allow you to feel like you're able to express how you're feeling, feel comfortable expressing because the scene is already set for that emotion. So
Okay. And Mrs. Bijal, like when it comes to the books, do you recommend fictional books or non-fictional books for the therapeutic purpose?
I recommend both fiction and nonfiction. So, the goal is to um, recommend what you're going to read and connect with. That connection piece is really important because if you're a fiction reader and you hate reading nonfiction, I'm definitely not going to suggest nonfiction because you're not going to bother reading it, right? Like I need somebody who's going to complete that book, who's going to, engage with it. That's really important. That engagement is so important for me. So essentially, that connection piece is the first part of the curation process. So, and we work with both, in fiction, you're going to see your story represented, you're going to see the emotional space to, engage with your own emotions. In nonfiction, you're going to see the coping strategies, the guidance, the hand holding. And if you're somebody who prefers to read that, then, there's a space for that. And then you've got things like memoir, which very similar to novels, very sort of character based and story driven. Yet one is founded in more truth and the other is founded more in fiction. But
Hmm.
both of them are wonderful because they're both stories, and it's that power of story that's what we want to capture, because stories are our first language. Before language was even written, language is just a social construct, but stories are something that we all can relate to in symbolism. Our unconscious brain really connects with that.
Hmm.
So yeah, so
And
both.
if may I ask you, Mrs. Bijal, like what sort of books do you use as a tools for your therapy? Like, can you recommend some of the books that you try to use for the therapeutic?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are always going to be some books that come to mind more than others. But for things like anxiety or OCD, I'd have books like Turtles All the Way Down, which is a fiction book by John Green. Um, if you're, reflecting on midlife or regrets or decisions, and Matt Haig's The Midlife Crisis is good. Um, there's also The Second Mountain if you prefer nonfiction. But if you're struggling with trauma, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score is a great book. If you're looking at productivity, then James Clear's The Atomic Habits, that's more
Oh,
nonfiction.
yeah. Hmm.
But if you're a woman who's reassessing her identity in midlife, Miranda July's All Fours is great, or Until August, the Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, which is more of a romance book, but if you're reassessing a relationship, it's there's so many amazing books out there. And
Yeah.
I finished a book last year called Bibliotherapy, The Healing Power of Reading. And that has a recommended reading list for all these issues under the sun, from
Wow.
all these addressing mental health topics, from anxiety to depression to midlife to relationships to breakups. And under each title, arranged by an A to Z format, I've got a fiction recommendation, nonfiction, and poetry. So people can just pick up that book and use it as a bit of a reading guide as to what to read for different issues. So that's in the last section. But in the middle section, I also have stories from my bibliotherapy room, as I call it. And that talks about people who I've helped, who have used books for different things, from even neurodiversity to sexual orientation to loss, all of those things. And at the beginning of the book, I also have a history of therapeutic reading, and I have a bit more of a methodology of bibliotherapy and how you can use it at home. The book, it's very much aligned for self-bibliotherapy. So you don't always need to go and see a bibliotherapist or a counselor. You can do a lot of this work at home. And I have lots of different techniques, creative bibliotherapy techniques that I use, both reading and writing, that people can benefit from.
Wow.
So,
Uh,
yeah.
this is really all interest, like really intriguing. And I would like to know, when did you had the epiphany that I want to be a bibliotherapist?
Yeah, look, I mean, I trained as a mathematician and I worked in investment banking for like God knows how long, 13 years. And I loved it. I love numbers, but I also really enjoyed, learning how people work, because the more I worked in banking, the more I came across different personalities and working with different people. And I honestly felt that I need like a little bit of a repertoire of
Hmm.
people skills. And I've ended up doing a part-time diploma in counseling. And then from there, I use literature a lot in my own counseling sessions. And I talk about my story in the book, and which I think is out in India as well. It just released earlier this month in, hardback, paperback, Kindle. But I talk about my story in the book, and
Sorry for interruption. This one, right? If my
oh,
view,
bibliotherapy, yes, yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So I think the hardback has just come out in India, so it's quite
yeah,
exciting to
I'm gonna
get hand.
purchase it, and I'll like make sure that I'll really read it thoroughly, and then again I'll bother you with the questions about it.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk more about it once you've read it. Or do an author Q&A, just so that more people can benefit from the book. But yeah, so essentially, my journey then began then when I was using bibliotherapy in my own training therapy sessions, because when you're training, you have to be in therapy yourself, because that's how you learn. So I was using a lot of books in my counseling sessions, and I really wanted to then bring this technique to other people who might find it helpful. So I have this very niche, therapy practice counseling practice, sorry, because I'm a counselor, but where I use bibliotherapy specifically. And if you're curious about the books that, shaped me, I have a very long list in the book, but, things like I love Judy Blume growing up, and James Redfield's The Celestine Prophecy was, really foundational for me. And I always enjoy reading philosophical books, and I think that
Hmm.
was but Khaled Hosseini's A Thousand Splendid Suns, and I mean over the years of there've been so many books that have been influential, but it's nice to also be able to promote them in the book. But it's kind of it's like paying tribute, payback time. Um, but yeah, it's wonderful if we can use it in more, use literature
Okay.
in a bit more depth than
Hmm.
we
And
do as we.
correct me if I'm wrong, but if you want to become a bibliotherapist, then like it is obligatory that you read a lot of books. You should be a voracious reader, I guess.
Yeah, look, it's helpful. I don't every single book that I prescribe might not have read every single one,
Oh,
because
okay.
it's impossible, especially if you find a book that will be useful to someone and you haven't read it, I'd still recommend it. So it's not obligatory, but it does help. And I mean, I do have an online bibliotherapy course that people might find useful, and in there I have a whole reading list of books that I recommend people read as a basic foundation. So yeah.
And
So
the million dollar question, Bijalji, that what are the results of it? Does this therapy actually work?
yes, yeah, look, I mean it weren't like any therapy or counseling session, if you're not resonating with a book or literature, just like if you don't resonate with your therapist, it may not work. But I have enough stories of clients who have found it profoundly life-changing. And I think we've all experienced that moment when a book has been very influential for us. So the right book and that connection will definitely help. And I share, obviously, in the book, I have the results as evidence in there, but if you want like some more solid evidence, but I do, for me personally and for my clients, it has been really useful, and I think that's why they tend to come back for more sessions. Or I also offer book prescription services, so you don't necessarily need like a session. You can I curate a reading list of 7 to 10 books for you, like depending on what's going on in your life. So if you say, you know so I curate these book prescriptions for therapeutic reasons, also for personal interest, but often for therapeutic. And you might say, oh, I'm really struggling with a breakup, and I've had a really difficult time with my partner, and what are the books that might help us or help me if I'm going through a breakup or a loss of some sort. but I only like reading fiction and I only have, you know, 10 minutes every day to read, then I can create a reading list for you to match, that. So it's very bespoke and tailored, and you just fill out a short questionnaire on the website. So I also do that, because a lot of my clients could be introverted and may not want to necessarily engage in a bibliotherapy session, but would be very happy to receive a reading list, you know. So so I tend to do that as well.
Like you said that you were in the banking for more than a decade. So was it
Yeah.
easy for you to, change your career? Like I'm assuming that you are completely into this bibliotherapy right now, right?
Yeah, I complete it was a 360-degree switch. So I I was an accountant and then in investment banking, and I did it for 13 years, and then I kind of had to just part ways and do this full time, because that's what you need to like grow the practice and commit to it. And they've both been meaningful experiences. I don't want to belittle my investment banking experience. It was very meaningful. And this is also very meaningful in a different way. And it's hard. Like, there are going to be those days where, self-motivation is needed when you have your
Mm.
own business. Um, whereas in a job, it's just easy. You just turn up and you're told what to do and you don't have to think. Well, you do have to think, but you don't always have to think about the big decisions and the
Mm.
creative strategy. So, they both have their pros and cons, I would say. Yeah.
And if I tell you honestly, like in like a lot of people have this mentality that if you read books, you are not cool. You are kind of like like social kind of person. So
Right. Yeah.
what sort of what's your take on that? Because a
That's
lot of
really
people feel this
That's
way.
really interesting to hear that that's the kind of attitude. Because I know in the UK, it's definitely a nation of book lovers.
Okay.
Um, and I think we have so many bookstores and so many literature festivals, and parents really advocate it for their kids. So I think there is this love. But you're right. I think, a lot of boys do drop off after the age of 10 to university. There's just this time period when reading's just not cool, or it's not as cool as a video game. And we are trying to counteract that in the UK. I don't know if that's an issue in India as well. But stories make us so rich, and I feel that it really is a mistake for people to forget that, or to be ignorant of that, or to not pay attention to it. Because also those teenage years are the best times of your life, that you're going to get loads of time to read. As you get older, like, reading time just goes. So, really have to embrace it and make the most of it. Um, because you don't know what you will come across. You won't know what you'll be surprised by. You won't know what you learn about yourself. You won't know how you will solve a problem because you read something. And the decisions you'll make because you read something. And books are our guide. So it would be kind of, a little, risk. What's the word? I think it would be a little naive to ignore them.
And
Yeah.
as you are a working professional as well as mother, so do you believe in the concept of work-life balance? Does it exist in real world?
Gosh, it's very hard. I have to admit, it's very hard. And in the real world, no. I think you can have everything at different points of time, but not all at once. Um, it's very difficult with kids because, raising children is probably one of the most important jobs that you can do, and you probably also feel like your work job is also very important. So it's really those conflicting lives that you're constantly leading, and it's tough, and it can be often be very, very stressful. But I'd say just carve out some time to read, and that will some mindful reading, as I call it, and that will just calm the cortisol levels or the stress levels,
Mm.
you know, if you're a reader and like reading. But look, if you don't like reading a book, you can always listen to something on your
Yeah.
walk, or audiobooks are wonderful. I'm sure I think India is probably the biggest market for audiobooks. So, you know, people need to just be making the most of this, you know.
Hmm, definitely.
Yeah. So you're not,
And,
if
uh,
you're embarrassed to be seen with a book, just listen to one, you know, just one AirPod.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of kids, like nowadays, what I observe is a lot like there are a lot of helicopter parents, and they mollycoddle their children. They don't allow them to grow themselves. They are like they are worried all the time about their where their children go, what they do, all the activities. So, what's your take on that? Do you think that parents should behave in such a way? I personally feel like that.
You mean that they should be helicopter parenting?
Yeah, is it a right way towards parenting?
I don't, it's again striking a balance between giving your kids their own agency, and then also at certain times you might have to step in, depending on the situation. So I think it's a bit of both. Um, Especially when it comes to social media, I think you could probably be a bit more of a helicopter parent and just remove
Mhm.
it from people from their lives, because it's not a great, really messes with our brain and our dopamine systems in the brain,
Sure.
and is rewarding us for the wrong reasons. And we don't want to set those brain pots, because if when you grow up, you'll have addiction issues and all of that. So I
Mhm.
think for that, helicopter parenting is great. But for other things, there's also something to be said about child-led, um, just child-led behaviors. So letting them choose the book they want to read, as long as it's, within the context. Sometimes they might even want to read the same book twice. That's okay, because they've still got something to learn from it. That's why they keep going back to it. So, many instances, it's about also giving them a sense of responsibility, a sense of agency, a sense of an ability to make decisions, and also sometimes letting them fall, because that's how you build resilience, being able to learn from your mistakes and get back up again. So yeah, so there is, a balance to be stricken, and it's a lot of the times it's a judgment call, but yeah, I don't know if that was helpful.
Hmm. Okay. And I recently saw that the your last post was about poetry as medicine. I guess you posted about
Yeah.
that. So can you
Yes.
enlighten me about that?
Yeah, sure. So Poetry is Medicine, it's just an event that I'm running here in the UK with some doctors who are also poets and who've used poetry with their patients. And so we're all talking about the power of poetry, which is a subset of bibliotherapy, in sort of helping us heal, because when we have mental shifts, that does aid with the physical recovery of illness, and it also allows doctors to really understand and empathize with the patient, because now they're connecting with the poem and it's coming to light as to how they might be feeling, and it's that holistic approach to
Hmm.
medicine. So I'm really excited to be talking at the event and, sharing my expertise, but also, like, I'm going to be reading a chapter from the book on that, or the one that's focused on poetry therapy, um, and using it in a group bibliotherapy setting. So I hope people can make it. It's going to be raising money for doctors in distress, so doctors who go to war zones and other conflict-filled areas to help people. So, I think it's for a good cause, and also the Poppy cause, the Poppy Factory, which is all about, paying tribute to the soldiers of World War One and World War Two, of many of whom were Indian soldiers as well, who fought for the British Army. So it's nice to be raising money for all of them and the causes and charities that they support. So
Okay. And what are some of the life skills and values which you like to, pass on to your children?
look, I think obviously reading is a lifelong skill, and something that will always be with them even when they don't have other guides around them. So I think I think they need to hold on to that forever. But also just, simple things like the value of kindness and inclusivity and sharing your work and being altruistic, because the greatest reward is not money. The greatest reward is when you're altruistic, and altruism, that is the greatest inner reward and fulfillment. I guess in Indian philosophy we say our karma, our duty, our
Yes.
dharma,
Yes.
and something really is fulfilled. meaningful. So, I definitely want to pass on all of that to them. And, just being a good person, I think
Yeah.
that's really
Oh.
important.
Hmm.
And and never giving up, persistence, and
Hmm.
life is unfair, and we just have to kind of navigate around that.
Oh,
So,
that's true. You speak volumes. And what are your go-to books that you can read gazillion of times and never get tired of it?
oh gosh. Look, I love reading the Roald Dahl books with my kids because they're always so wonderfully put together, and the surprises and the elements of how Roald Dahl takes the story. Like I love those books, and I could read them over and over again. I love Little Women as well. So those
Oh.
are just my childhood books. But often just books that are really, the phrasing is really beautifully put, the prose is amazing. I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez's books. I really liked Until August. I thought he did that was a posthumously published book, so after he died and
Okay.
his children decided to publish it. But I love books by Khaled Hosseini. I'm sure I could read those again, although they're very traumatic. Um, but something which has the power to make me think differently every time, and it challenges my thinking in a different way,
Hmm.
or pushes to new boundaries. So there are lots of different, poetry often can do that as well. So, I really like Rupi Kaur's poetry. It made me think of things differently. I love Rumi's poetry. Oh my God.
Oh,
I
yes.
I have to, I always go back to it and re-look at it. And also Khaled Hosseini, his poetry fables, your children are not your children, and on marriage, and they're amazing life lessons, and they just reinvigorate some philosophical thought that can be quite comforting, you know? So yeah.
As you spoke about Rumi, can you share with me some of your like favorite quotes about Rumi has said, some of the quotes given by Rumi?
Oh my God, I cannot remember any on the top of
It's
my
all right.
head.
It's all right. Yeah, sometimes it happens.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many that I've saved and so many that I've shared, and yet I cannot remember
Uh,
any. It's
I guess
terrible.
the one with that reminds the that is there in my memory is the one with you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the whole ocean. I guess that one
Yes,
is said by Rumi.
yes. Yeah, that one's a great one. I mean, I have some that I even share on my Instagram, that I have loved. But if you allow me a moment, I can, I
Yeah,
can, I
sure.
can.
Because whenever I go through, like sometimes I scroll and the quote of Rumi comes up, I
Oh
pay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. He is. There was there's some really short ones as well. Like they're just so meaningful. Even Osho. I don't know
hmm,
if you know Osho, but
yeah.
his is also fantastic. And even Buddha quotes from Buddhism, I love those. Um, but I think there are some, like I love his poem The Guest House, you know.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if you've come across it, but I mean I can read it. It's, you know, this being human is a guest house. It's so similar to our, in our Indian philosophy where we talk about karma and the soul and the body. But it's, this, it's like this being human is a guest house every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, a momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Oh,
So it's really embracing yourself, the
hmm,
emotion, just everything, and knowing that it's also transient. It will
yes.
go, it will pass,
Hmm.
the pain,
Oh,
the pleasure, and just don't pay too much attention to either. They're just momentary, and life is momentary, and everything's transitional, you know, it's
Wow,
just well,
that's great.
yeah.
And do you believe in the concept of stoicism?
Yes, I do. In fact, in my book, I talk about, the ancient Greeks and Stoicism as a very key part of therapeutic reading.
Mhm.
And even CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
that came from Stoicism a little bit. And it's a great way to live, again, it's the ancient Greek philosophy. So that's
Yes.
the foundation of all Western philosophy, right? I mean, I talk a lot about Indian philosophy, which is Eastern, and then Stoicism is the foundation of a lot of Western philosophy as well. So I think they both have their virtues. And
And
um,
if I tell you honestly, the reason I asked you is because I'm currently reading this book, Focus of
focus
What
on
Matters.
masters.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this book is like I'm reading it for the third time, and every time I open this book, it like I feel rejuvenated because all the
Yeah.
lines, every line is, I can resonate with it. So because
Yeah.
of that, I started following Stoicism. So that's why I thought that you are the right person to ask this question to.
Yes. Stoicism is incredibly powerful. And for things like depression and anxiety, it's a very good philosophy to live by, um, if you're struggling with it. So, yeah, the Stoicism is wonderful. Marcus Aurelius's meditations are
Mm.
great.
Yeah.
I think they're very popular. Um, and then Ryan, gosh, I've forgotten his surname now. Ryan Holiday.
Okay.
He's written a lot of books on Stoicism.
Mm.
If you like Stoicism, you'll also like Montaigne. I talk about Montaigne a lot in my books. He's a French philosopher.
Yeah,
Kind
Montaigne.
of builds
Yes.
on the
Yes.
ideas of Stoicism, but just life lessons as well. Very resonant writing. So yeah, I think, I'm curious. Did you feel like you learned more every time you reread the book?
Yeah, like every time I feel like I have to read between the lines and I try to, assimilate all those things inside myself because I don't simply read it. I try to digest it. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I keep making notes. I write down like all the things. Even like in the front page, I have this habit of writing everything. So I write all these things like some of the things that I can,
oh yeah,
I don't
yeah,
have to read the whole book. Like we can never fully avoid undesirable situations. Remember
yeah,
that you are not your possessions. So these are some of the things that everyone should, know about.
yeah. Universal truths. Yeah,
Hmm. Yes, definitely. Then
yeah,
there is this. Life is not all only about tomorrow. Spend on the things that make you a better human. The concept of altruism that you mentioned.
yes, yeah, 100%. It's the most rewarding if you're looking for something rewarding. You know?
Uh, One last question. Like a few months ago, I was watching a YouTube video, and in that, it was like the video was about significance of reading, and in that, it was mentioned that when you read, there are some sort of chemicals inside your brain that only gets activated through the method of reading. It cannot be activated by any other sources. If you watch movie, any other thing, or only reading can activate those chemicals. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, reading is more closely mirrors our life experience, because when you're watching, a film, you're not using your imagination. And I think
Hmm.
it's that skill of the imagination that closely mirrors our day-to-day lives. And, even when we're dreaming, which is probably the third type of um lived experience. I think, you're living your normal life, and then you're also, when you're reading, you're experiencing an imagined version of something, and then when you're dreaming, you're also experiencing something. So I think those are the three types of kind of life experiences that we're all going through, and they probably have similar processes in the brain, you know.
Okay.
So
Hmm. So I guess
yes.
this video would be the kind of educational video for the people who are not into reading. And I guess after watching this video, a lot of people would start reading the books, and that's gonna help them immensely.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope that you know this can be something that shifts something in people's minds about reading, and also the healing power of reading, especially when you're going through something difficult. So please do take up some of the things that we mentioned in here, and you might also find my book more
Mm,
helpful. I guess
yeah.
it's a wide, this conversation, but yeah.
Again, I would
I
like to tell to my viewers that this is Bijal Shah and this is her book. Uh, so go check
Bibliotherapy, the
out the
healing
book.
power of reading.
Yes, go check out her book and if possible, buy it also. I'm sure it's going to help you immensely.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what people think, and I hope they love the book. So
And to be honest, this entire podcast, like it's kind of an like ineffable experience for me, and I'm really grateful that you came to my podcast on such a short notice, and I had a well of a time doing this conversation with you.
no, it was wonderful. It was really, honestly, I loved your questions, and it was so nice to talk about books. So thank you for thinking of me and inviting me. It was such a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to more, yeah, to more conversation.
Definitely. And on that note, Bijulji, I won't hold you any longer. It was really nice, and I hope that we will catch up soon. Take care.
Yes, great. No, thank you. Take care, Janelle. Cheers.